Welcome to the MAHA Media Hub and the MAHA Revolution. I'm Tony Lyons, president of MAHA Action. We at MAHA are always going to be more powerful when we work together. And we want to work with everyone. We want to listen to all different points of view, all different perspectives. So, this may sound like hyperbole, but, not since President Lincoln's team of rivals has a cabinet been staffed with more people who have different perspectives while being able to work together as an incredible team. And, President Trump has turned the tide in partisan politics. He's brought in Democrats and independents, and so that people can talk to each other who have conflicting ideas, discuss them, reach compromises, and bring the best possible health outcome for all of us. So, last week there was some tension with potential changes planned by the EPA. 2 days ago, we invited Administrator Lee Zeldin from the EPA to come to a MAHA party that we had in Washington, D.C. And he not only showed up, but he gave an incredible speech. People were very happy with it, very positive. And then after that, he met with activists who have concerns about the proposed changes at the EPA. So Administrator Zeldin invited, this group of MAHA activists to come in to meet with his team, with something like a dozen people from his team, the following day at EPA headquarters to discuss things with them and to try to get to a better outcome. And that's the best we can hope for as a stepping stone to real change. So we're so grateful for his leadership, for his openness to new ideas, to new facts, to new perspectives, and to looking at different viewpoints of what the science says. So MAHA won't always agree with the people who we bring to the table, but we believe that we can make the best possible progress if we're open and honest and have vigorous debate. And, that's what's been lacking in politics in this country. So we need to break through the partisanship, the corporate corrupt science, and reintroduce to, all the people in this country to the marketplace of ideas, to the idea that they might be wrong and that there might be better ways to get things done. So today on the Media Hub, we'll be joined by Cora Mandy, who runs public affairs for Trump's EPA. And we'll also have Kelly Ryerson on, who's been collaborating with farmers, scientists, policymakers, and the media to address, potential damage to our soil, to our bodies. So these are people who have opposing points of view, who we believe can get to a better outcome by talking together and by working together. So, people have lost faith in their government, and we want to help rebuild that sense of trust. And we believe that people can learn from each other, share their perspectives, and achieve better health outcomes. So the confirmations that we're having today, we think can help shape and create better policies for the future. So I don't think there's anybody better to start with who's just terrific at having those kinds of conversations than Gary Brecka. Gary is known as the ultimate human, and he's earned that title through his dedication to sharing real science, to helping people optimize their well-being, their full potential, and their longevity. So welcome, Gary Brecka. Great to have you on once again.
Tony, thank you so much. That call that I got from you this morning after, last night's meeting and the follow-up meeting, or the previous night's meeting and the follow-up meeting with the EPA, I screamed into the phone. I told you that was one of the biggest wins, and that's the reason why we're here. And it shows you that we can humanize some of these governmental agencies, and they really they are moms and dads and husbands and wives, and they're real human beings, and they're not intentionally trying to poison us, and they're willing to lend a favorable ear. I happened to talk about it last week on the MAHA call about the approval of the cyclobutyfluoram, which was previously just used on the golf courses and lawns, but now being sprayed on soybeans and lettuce and cotton. And this, this PFAS, represents the fifth proposal that they had to approve these different these different PFAS chemicals. And we know that this one broke down into something called TFA, which is actually one of the most pervasive in our water supply. And even talked about the research that links this to the potential of exceeding our planetary boundary threat, which means that the social health harms become irreversible. To then go from that meeting and all the work that Kelly and Kyle have done and the great work that they did at that event to then meet with the EPA the next day, to me, this is what the MAHA movement is all about. We don't have to create enemies. We can create co-activists where we find, even if there's a marginal area of overlap between our agendas where they align, similar to how Bobby and Trump came together. So, I mean, hats off to the administration and to Lee Zeldin and certainly to Kelly and Kyle for all their work in making this happen. If we can actually get to food contents and then what is put on to our food, this will be the most massive win for public policy, maybe in recorded history. I also just wanted to touch on Secretary Duffy and Bobby Kennedy's announcement on trying to improve our airports. And, God forbid that we actually put some money into having our architecture serve us in ways that foster mobility. My wife and I traveled 28 days out of the month for the last 90 days. We're trying to grow some roots in Miami right now. And one of the things that we did just for giggles was we counted the number of bars between when we cleared security and when we got to the door of our plane. And in most of the terminals that we were in, this is domestic and international, there were 6 bars between where we exited security and where we entered our flight. And, now they're building areas for people to vape. There's enclosed areas for people to smoke. There's plenty of areas for you to drink. And yet, the suggestion that we add additional areas for breastfeeding mothers or additional areas where people could get a workout, maybe even taking some of these bars and putting small gyms and taking the kitchen areas and adding changing and locker facilities. These are the kinds of changes that it's going to take, tiny, small, incremental changes that it's going to take to really move the needle for humanity. I mean, this chronic disease pandemic that we have is preventable chronic disease, and the vast majority of it is prevented by whole foods and mobility. And if you look at the number of fast food restaurants, the number of places where you can smoke, the number of places where you can drink, I certainly would rather fly next to somebody who just had a workout and a fresh shower than somebody who had 4 beers and a basket of fries before they got on the flight. And let's not forget about our pilots and our flight attendants that are moving through these airports. When we were traveling so intensely, we would have 4 or 5 hour layovers. We had tons of delays. And so I'm really excited to talk about championing some of these small incremental changes that I think could have massive impacts on how our architecture in public places can serve our biology. Adding farm-to-table restaurants, better food choices, areas where women can breastfeed privately instead of going into a public restroom and hiding in a stall, and areas where we could move our bodies, maybe take a fresh shower before we got on the airplane, and where kids could get out their Zoomies. I mean, I know I would rather fly next to a bunch of young kids that had actually just run around on a playground for 30 minutes than we're trying to do it in the middle seat in an economy class 5 hour flight. So I don't have much in that by way of specifics to add today. What a huge move by the EPA to embrace the MAHA movement and really extend that olive branch. We were preparing a massive media push across all of our channels. So now we've sort of laid that down in favor of this discussion that we can have. So thank you for your time.
That's great, Gary. Thanks so much. And it's such a great point that we don't want to substitute one form of settled science for a new form of settled science. We want to engage in maximum debate. And then your other point, which I really like too, is the point that we want to make it cheaper for people to be healthy, and we want to make it easier for people to be healthy. And that means, making airports, making playgrounds, making every area that people occupy, accessible to things that are healthy. So that's really critical to the future of the MAHA movement. So next up, we have Dr. Eric Berg. He has revolutionized the way that we all think about healthy eating. He's got over 36 million followers. He's been a really vocal backer of the MAHA movement. He's really focused on the broken food pyramid and trying to empower people to take control of his health. And just been an incredible partner in the work that the MAHA movement does. So I'm going to start off with a question. So, Dr. Berg, in one of your videos, you say that chronic disease in America didn't mysteriously rise. It was intentionally ignored. Can you sort of tell us and walk us through what you meant by that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, thanks for Tony for having me on. People this idea that this chronic disease just happened mysteriously, something that swept through in the country in the 80s or 90s. But the truth is, it's much simpler than that. It's not that the science was missing. I really think it was intentionally ignored. Even if you ask mainstream medicine about what causes chronic disease, they're carefully crafted messages to avoid blaming the food system, avoiding confronting the dietary guidelines. They never really talk about that. They don't talk about the conflicts of interest, where one person on the last dietary guideline had 151 financial ties to food and pharmaceutical drugs. Instead, they blame the calories, you're eating too much fat, you're not exercising enough, or you don't have enough willpower, or maybe it's genetics, right? Like our genetics changed before 1980 to now. So I think when you look at it, there has been a lot of science there, but it's been ignored completely. And sometimes they'll say, well, we need more healthcare. That's really what's missing. We need more medication. We need more screenings. Do we really? Is that really what we need? What happens, we have a polypharmacy with the elderly right now. If you take a healthy person and you put them on medication, are they going to increase their health? I mean, and I'm talking not about acute care, I'm talking about chronic disease. So I think we're sick not because we don't have enough healthcare. It's just because we're just ignoring these root causes, which we have a lot of science to back them up, but they're strategically ignored. So even if you take a look at 80 to 85% of chronic disease, it's related to some lifestyle factor, yet we only spend 1.9%, less than 2% of research goes to that. I mean, it's insane. Most of it goes to drugs. So there is hardcore science to talk about insulin resistance being at the root cause of many chronic problems. Refined carbohydrates, ultra-processed foods, seed oils, metabolic inflammation. These are not fringe science studies. These are published, repeatable, consistent, hardcore science, but it never made it into medical school training or the national dietary guidelines or public health messaging for some reason. I wonder why. So I think what we really need to do with MAHA, instead of having a food guideline that recommends 6 to 11 servings of grains every day, is to basically, it's not about creating new science, but just to promote the science that's already been ignored. Okay, so that's basically my message. Back over to you, Tony.
Thanks so much, Eric. That's such a great point that, we didn't get here by accident, and we're not going to solve these problems by accident. We're going to solve them by getting back to real science, getting back to the marketplace of ideas and getting rid of the corrupt corporate science that landed us in this position where 76% of the American public suffers from at least one chronic disease. So I'm so glad to work with all the people who are on this call and so many of the people watching to try to reverse these problems. Next up, we have Dr. Mehmet Oz, and he oversees health coverage for 160 million people with a budget of something like $1.7 trillion. And he is as dedicated to making people healthy as anyone who I've ever met. And whether it's working to shift the focus from treatment to prevention, from drugs to nutrition, he is working at this day and night, not for money, not for power, but because he really cares about making everybody in this country healthier. So I'm so happy to bring on Dr. Mehmet Oz.
How are you, Tony? Congratulations on all the success you've been having. I'm incredibly impressed by your ability to pull together lots of different factions. And I've told this story to some of you, but I was with Secretary Kennedy a few months ago, and we were talking about what it's like to be involved in MAHA. And he said he'd gone to Antarctica with the leader of Greenpeace. And he asked him, what's it like to have 1.1 million members? And apparently the leader of Greenpeace told Bobby that it was like being in charge of 1.1 million anarchists who had no intention of following anybody else because they're so confident that they needed to get this done now, and they were desirous and passionate and weren't going to be slowed down. So I'm very respectful of the power of the MAHA movement, but also the need for us to keep pushing forward, staying ahead of the curve. And part of the purpose of my day is to both give you comfort that there is massive progress being made, but also highlight where we're headed so you can brag on us. Tell the story because you can do it better than we can. And I probably ought to start by giving my version of what MAHA is, which is making it easier for Americans to be healthy. So if we automate things in our lives, we tend to do them. That's why I always tell people, don't make decisions in the morning. From the moment you get up, for the first couple hours of your day, it ought to be the same system every single day, right? You get up, you stretch, you do your workout, you have your coffee, you show up for work, you do all those things, sort of automated them. That way you sort of get that part of your day done, and you don't waste a lot of time making new decisions because you'll need that decision-making chi in the afternoon. That's why you get that sort of downer feeling around 3, 4. You need some candy. I know who out there is probably susceptible to this, but a lot of that is because you need sugar because your brain's getting worn out from making so many decisions. So if you have to make decisions about the food you're eating all the time, it's going to wear you down. That's why you stop at the junk food place on the way home, because you're exhausted and you don't want to think about it. So making and automating those decisions is helpful, but we as a society need to also do things so it's easier for you to be healthy, because when you pick up a normal food, it's healthy for you. You're not being surprised by thousands of ingredients that aren't even allowed in other countries. So to bring us to life this morning, Secretary Kennedy, Secretary Rollins from Agriculture, and I were at a press event together at the Ag Secretary's headquarters. And their idea was a push for regenerative agriculture. How do you make it feasible for farmers to actually do the extra work to preserve the topsoil, to make sure they're not using toxins and other additional chemicals to be able to grow their crops, but rather can grow them in a more natural fashion, which is more sustainable for the environment. And the idea of creating a supply of these foods is important, right? If we use SNAP waivers, for example, it creates more of a supply. It's one of the reasons they're so important. If you're getting farmers to make healthy food and then there's no demand for those foods, then you have a supply without a demand, the prices don't go up. And you need them to be appropriately priced so these are sustainable. So SNAP waivers matter. It's one of the issues today. Secretary Rollins signed 6 additional states waivers for SNAP. It's a big deal. That's 6 more states that are going to try to push. Now, the question you might ask is, why is that happening? And the reason it's happening is because when we put out the Rural Health Transformation Fund, it was one of many initiatives by the Trump administration to nudge, push, shove states to be more proactive in using their ability to supply people with SNAP benefits, to make those benefits healthy for you, to remove the ability for you to use junk food, ultra processed foods to satisfy those, because these are food-like substances, right? They're not even foods you're giving folks who desperately need these nutrients. And because they're generally less expensive because there are no nutrients, and nutrients drive up costs, it's important for us to be able to make it easier for these nutrient-dense foods to be shared across the population. So getting SNAP benefits there matters. In the Rural Health Transformation Fund, this $50 billion fund that Congress has given to us to distribute with Secretary Kennedy, we have asked states, in order to get that money, to put in SNAP waivers, because we think it actually will help these states get their people healthier. Now, it's a pain in the neck for some states. They've got to go back to their legislature. Some people say, well, why are you getting in the way of poor people? They should be allowed to have a soft drink if they want to relax, just like rich people can. And I keep responding, well, affluent people don't drink those things anymore. People who are paying attention have actually stopped consuming these empty caloric beverages and ultra-processed foods. So we should give the same opportunity and wisdom to folks who aren't part of that plan. So within Medicare, Medicaid, we have the ability to do that. We have annual wellness exams. We're now in our programs teaching people about healthy food, nudging them along in that direction. In fact, we within Medicare Advantage, which is the older folks on Medicare can choose that as the way they get their benefits. It's more than half of older Americans actually use Medicare Advantage. We're asking these folks to use healthy food when they give supplemental benefits. I point that out because that's about a third of all the people in that program. So it's tens of millions of people now are being given healthy food, not junk food. That increases the demand for the healthy food that the farmers are making. I can go on and on about the work that we've done in this area, but you can start to see the cohesive nature when ag is building the supply of healthy food. Secretary Kennedy and his team is putting out ideas, and you'll see the dietary guidelines come out next year, defining what healthy means. And then CMS, which is what I run, Medicare, Medicaid, is paying for those healthy foods, as well as Secretary Rollins with SNAP benefits. Now we're creating a demand for these healthy foods, and the ecosystem becomes virtuous, and everyone else benefits because now there's a big market, a growing market with taxpayer dollars to buy healthy foods, and only healthy foods. People are going to make more healthy foods. Now, for this to go full circle, we have other agencies that are involved. One of them is the EPA. I know many of you are not sure about the EPA, and to help allay that, Lee Zeldin actually came to the MAHA event earlier this week and spoke, which is always a good sign when the head of the agency wants to talk to you because they want to brag to you about how much they're doing to address the concerns that folks within the MAHA movement have about our environment. I don't believe he can be on the call today, but Cora Mandy is probably Cora's probably a better trade anyway, and frankly, she's going to speak to us. She's at the Trump EPA, which is how they call themselves, which is a clever name. At the Trump EPA, she's the head of public affairs, and I'd like to hand the ball to her, or maybe back to Tony, so he can do a more proper introduction, so you can hear what's happening in another agency that, again, is completely MAHA aligned and trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, let me just say, we've made it easy in this country to be sick. We've made it cheaper to be sick. So I'm so grateful to you, Dr. Oz, for working hard, for working really just incredibly hard to make it easier and cheaper to be healthy. So, the MAHA movement is filled with experts in disagreeing, in arguing, in challenging the status quo. And that means that we believe in real science, because that's what real scientists do. We disagree, we fight about the facts, and we try to get to better outcomes. And, that I think is an incredible asset to the country. So once again, I'm so happy to say that Administrator Lee Zeldin was able to make it to this call today. And I'm so grateful that you came to our party, that you met with activists, that you're open and willing to discuss things with us. It's just great to partner with you, and I look forward to all the things that are possible. Welcome to our show.
Yeah, thank you for having a great party a couple nights ago, and it was great to be with you and everyone else. Saw a lot of friends from back in New York and elsewhere, and meet a lot of new people as well. I had a great meeting yesterday with a bunch of your great members. We had a meeting for about an hour here at EPA headquarters, and happy to join you here. Our three best press releases that we've put out this year from the EPA, I talk about it often regardless of the group that I'm in front of. On the 100th day of President Trump's term in office, we released the list of our top 100 environmental accomplishments from those first 100 days. When President Trump was hitting his 200th day, we released a list of our top 100 environmental accomplishments from those next 100 days. And just a couple of weeks ago, when President Trump hit his 300th day, we released the list of our next top 100 environmental actions and accomplishments of this Trump EPA and this Trump administration. I've thoroughly enjoyed working very closely with Secretary Kennedy and Stephanie and the rest of that team at HHS. Dr. Oz is amazing, so following him truly is an honor. And we want to make sure that MAHA Action and your members have a seat at the table here, and that we're able to directly engage, communicate. We don't have to just go through communications through some media outlet that's trying to take down President Trump, and instead we're able to just get to the heart of productive, substantive work. Over the course of the last few weeks, we've been working on finalizing a MAHA agenda for EPA. It's going to build on a lot of the work that we've already been doing this year with regards to replacing lead pipes and tackling that issue, to plastics. We have an initiative we started this year called Feed It Onward to combat food waste. We clean up Superfund sites and brownfield sites. That effort's important. We do a lot of good work with the Office of Enforcement.
Let's give Lee Zeldin just a minute to work on those tech problems. But, his point that he started with, that there's so many people out there, so many people in the media who are trying to drive wedges between people who really want to work together and who respect each other and who think we can reach better health outcomes. And we don't want to build wedges. We want to build bridges. We want to find ways to work together. We want to improve people's health. And we think that's going to happen by having, the broadest possible group of people to discuss things with and to achieve better outcomes by including more voices. So, that I think is what this call is all about. That's what the MAHA movement is all about. And, that's what we're really working towards. So, Lee, I'm not sure whether you were able to get back on.
Can you hear me, Tony?
Yes, back.
Okay, I want to be sensitive and not cut into Kelly's precious time. I just wanted to wrap up and say, right now we're finalizing a MAHA agenda for EPA that we want to roll out. We want to make sure that we're incorporating the feedback, the inputs with all of you. It's something that you're proud of. Everything from the gold standard science, and as I heard you say, Tony, the other night, radical transparency with studies that are used, that are looked at, that are placed on the website and communicated with the public. We saw with the regenerative farming announcement made with Secretary Kennedy and Secretary Rollins today, the incorporation of precision agriculture, the ability to reduce the use of pesticides to make sure that we are fulfilling our statutory obligations and doing everything collaboratively. A lot of our engagement this year has been directly with Secretary Kennedy and HHS. But for any of you out there who want to be directly in touch with this EPA, you want to partner with us, you want to help with the development of the MAHA agenda for EPA, please let Tony and his team at MAHA Action know. We will be in touch with Tony and his team to make sure that any person who reaches out to him following this call, anyone reaching out to the MAHA Action team following this call will be part of that process in developing the MAHA agenda for this Trump EPA. So looking forward to working with all of you. I'll keep it there and make sure that I don't cut into Kelly's time any further. Thanks again, Tony, for the invite.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. And thanks so much for your leadership and for your willingness to work with us. And so many people are trying, like I said before, but I just want to make sure Lee hears it, that so many people are trying to drive wedges and we want to build bridges. So we're excited to work with you, to partner with you, and to come up with the best possible outcomes. So we're just grateful that you're willing to engage with us. Thanks for coming on, and look forward to future contact. But let's move now to Kelly. So Kelly Ryerson works at the intersection of agriculture and health. She's collaborating with farmers, scientists, policymakers, and the media to try to help protect us from chemical damage to our soil, to our bodies, to our children. And, she's an incredible activist, and she's really shown her willingness to try to make progress, not as an outsider, but somebody who can be an insider, who can actively discuss things with all stakeholders to, get what I said before, better outcomes for all people in this country. So welcome, Kelly.
It was really quite a week. As you said, we had a MAHA event on Monday. I was able to meet Lee in person. We had a great talk. And amazingly, frankly, I imagine that was very hard for him to come into a MAHA holiday party. Holiday parties are hard as they are enough. So it was impressive. And then we were invited the next day, several activists, including Alexandra Munoz and Kendall McIntosh. We were invited to come to a meeting. We thought it was just going to be with Lee. It was not. He brought out the leadership of the EPA for us to meet. We had the head of water, the head of ag, just his very senior people. And they made themselves entirely this is, by the way, is unprecedented. I've been doing this through many administrations. This is unprecedented access to the people at the EPA. The truth is usually they don't even call you back or they don't email you back. And it's very, very frustrating for people that are just trying to do the right thing on behalf of our children and or ourselves, frankly. So that access was wonderful. We had an hour talk. He listened to our concerns and he has follow-up ideas. Most people who know me know that I definitely got into the specifics of the glyphosate issue that we have and the corrupt science that is continuing to not have it stamped as a carcinogen. That's an enormous problem. We talked about endocrine disruptors. I have many friends who are infertile. This was a huge, huge voting point for the entire Republican constituency, but I would say it's entirely bipartisan and independent. We want our fertility back. We want to enjoy the right to health. And unfortunately, it's very inconvenient for corporations. And I used to work in investment banking, so I know how corporations work. It is inconvenient to them that we are just going to need to be pulling back regulations and trying to figure out and be creative how we can still be a very profitable economy without simultaneously poisoning ourselves. So that is a discussion I'm excited to have. Now, one thing that is really, really problematic, continues to be problematic with the EPA, and I actually don't know that Administrator Zeldin even knew about this. I have to say, our relationship, it was a really great meeting. I think, it was really positive, but I think that he is being duped by his Kyle Kunkel, who somehow landed from being a notorious chemical lobbyist, is now head of the Office of Pesticide. So it's entirely a story of the fox guarding the hen house. Nancy Beck, who is a very notorious chemical lobbyist, very successful chemical lobbyist, is now heading up our Office of Chemicals. So this is the kind of thing that I think both MAHA and MAGA voters really want to see flushed out, because this is the old story of the corruption in our regulators that continue to prioritize corporate profits over human health. It's not dissimilar from the same story that was happening with keeping the vaccines on the market. For example, we should no longer have atrazine in our drinking water. It is an extreme endocrine disruptor. There are ways around it. I work with farmers. There are ways we don't need to use atrazine. We shouldn't have paraquat sprayed anywhere. It's so tightly connected with Parkinson's. We have a Parkinson's epidemic in this country. It is banned in China. Yet ChemChina sells it to us, more than happy to let us poison ourselves. But I worry that the truth of those facts in pesticides are never going to get to the administrator's ears because of this corporate protection in those agencies. But overall, I really am thankful and grateful for this connection and this new ability to share information. And I look forward to seeing what successes come out of the EPA in the near term.
Thanks so much, Kelly. And it's really a great point that we want to help the EPA. We want to help all of the different branches of government get information that they might not have. So we don't want to attack them. We want to work with them. We want to get to a point where we can really impact what's going to happen in this country, because the conversations that we're having now are going to be the policies that we have in the future. And if we make good enough arguments, and if we are able to discuss these things with people who are open to them, then I think we're going to make great change possible. The kinds of change that, like you said, people didn't get back to you in the future. We have people now who are getting back to us, who are open to discussions with us. And that, I think, is a great, great starting point. So very, very grateful for that. that chance that we haven't had before. So next up, we have Dr. Robert Malone. He is the one of the inventors of the mRNA technology and the DNA vaccination platforms. He's been a great MAHA advocate, and just been so helpful to the things that we all really care about, and so helpful to kind of the freedom of speech that's been lacking in this country, where he's just brought up things that, ideas that were shut down and forced people to look at facts that they just weren't looking at. So it's so good to see him as part of the CDC's advisory committee on vaccines and on vaccine practices, and to really have somebody there who is going to really just hold their feet to the fire and try to get outcomes that are nuanced, that are reasonable, that are science-based, and that really champion children's health. So thanks so much for coming on once again, Dr. Robert Malone.
Hi, Tony. You're always too kind. And I think we can move on from highlighting my role in the mRNA vaccines, if you don't mind.
Don't mind at all.
So ACIP was quite a blowout last week. And it came on top of a lot of other things, and then was followed by the president's directive to the secretary to reevaluate the entire childhood vaccine schedule. But I'd like to highlight a couple of the false narratives here, because we have a collection here online of a number of important influencers. Number one is Elizabeth Warren and others are busy promoting the false narrative that Bobby has once again taken away vaccines from people. What we did at ACIP was to be extremely careful in our wording, to not compromise the ability of anyone to take a hepatitis B vaccine or have their children take it, should that be their desire. The secretary has said, and we have aligned with that no one is going to have their vaccines taken away. We ensured that the financing was still there. Now, Whoopi Goldberg, on the other hand, is recently quoted as saying, "I'm not going to let Secretary Kennedy tell me what vaccines to take." Amen, Vic. I'm totally with Whoopi Goldberg. The government should not be telling us what we can put into our body. That is a core principle here, and I want to reinforce that right now. We have, as I brought up in discussion, and I got a CDC expert to agree with me, public health in the United States has become perverted by basically utilitarian logic. The idea that the state has the right to enforce the greatest good for the greatest number by insisting that you receive various products, injectable products, even though you don't have full informed consent. And that's wrong. What MAHA is trying to do is not to, deny people access to vaccines, but rather absolutely rigorously insist that people have the right to self-determination, that people have the right to enter into a physician-patient relationship that is focused on that patient and their best needs, and allowing that patient to make informed decisions about whether or not to accept a medical product or a medical procedure. So, Whoopi, we are violently in agreement. But Secretary Kennedy is not telling you what to take. You've got that one wrong. We both agree that the government, the state, has no right to tell its citizens what medical procedures they must take. And that is at the core of this. Now, there's another thing I want to highlight that I mentioned in the ACIP meeting, and that is that we do have the indication that we may have, here's a fancy set of words for you, cumulative toxicity. This is my reference to the elephant in the room. And what I was talking about is that a vast majority of these childhood vaccines rely on a substance to make them immunogenic. In other words, to make them work. What is that substance? It's aluminum salts. Are aluminum salts toxic? Yes, they are. It's a question of dose, just like everything in medicine. It's a question of dose and toxicity and thresholds. And the vaccines that our children receive have been tested without adequate controls, but only considered as individual vaccines. But they almost all have this common component of alum or aluminum salts And so what they're getting, because our children are getting so many different vaccines, is they're getting many, many, many doses of this toxic material. That has to be reevaluated and it has to be stopped. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope you appreciated what we did last week.
Yeah, it's such a great point. This science is never settled. Medical books from 20 years ago will always be wrong. They're always going to be littered with errors. And we need people like Dr. Robert Malone to come on to challenge the status quo and to get us up-to-date science that is the best it can possibly be. So next up, we have Senator Rand Paul. Once again, he's been a great MAHA voice and very outspoken, helped us get the Hep B vaccine, with a more nuanced view from the CDC. So we're just very grateful for all that he's done. Welcome, Senator Rand Paul.
Thanks, Tony. Great to be with you. This is a big week for, I think, everybody who wants to have science based on evidence and not on emotion. The emotion has always been, oh, everybody must be vaccinated for Hep B. It's a terrible disease. Well, it is a terrible disease, and the numbers have come way down, but the numbers haven't come down because we vaccinated every child in America. The numbers of hepatitis B came down for a variety of reasons, which have to do with reducing sexual contact, also reducing dirty needles, using sterile technique, but then also, in all likelihood, the vaccine and the antibodies given at the time of birth for moms that have hepatitis probably has been part of reducing the numbers. But they make the mistake of then saying, oh, no, the numbers are down because we vaccinate every child in the whole world against Hep B. That's just not true and not provable. But what is provable is that if the mom does not have hepatitis B, which is 99.99% of people, that there really is not a medical indication for giving your child that, because the routine way of obtaining or being infected with Hep B is not something that routinely a child will come across. The interesting thing is, though they force Hep B as newborns, it actually wears off by the time you're about 10. And so when you're 10 or 12 and entering your teenage years, you'd have to have it again anyway if you're gonna choose to take it. And that's probably really where the decision-making ought to be, is at 10 or 12. Now, the committee backed it up to 2 months, and I'm in favor of that. I might have gone even further and said, always leave it up to parents, frankly. But the hysteria of the establishment that came out and said, how dare the committee allow people to make decisions on vaccines based on individually based decision-making. So realize what they're arguing against. They're arguing against informed consent between doctor and patient based on that individual. That's the way medicine's supposed to be practiced. To me, the committee said something so common sense, so uncontroversial, that it's hard to believe anybody could argue with it. And yet, hysteria, nothing but hysteria. And really, the schedule's only going back 2 months. So I find this to be a good change. I favor it, but something that really is not nearly as controversial as the media has made it out to be. I tell people that I know pretty much 2 things for certain. There's a lot of things we may know or may not know about vaccines, but there are 2 things that are pretty certain. Hep B, how it's transmitted, and that a newborn from a healthy mom who doesn't have it doesn't need a Hep B, and there's no medical indication. The second thing I think I know pretty well, that the COVID vaccine is not necessarily for children or healthy young adults, and actually the risks of the vaccine exceed the benefits. And so these aren't extreme statements, but even these statements, which really aren't intended to be over the top, are rejected by the establishment. But I think we have clear arguments, and we should continue to make the arguments that, particularly in children and young healthy adults, that the risks of the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, exceed the benefits. These are easy arguments to make. But I've been also telling people, and I continue, I've written a letter to the CDC on this, I think we should re-study the issue of whether or not the COVID vaccine reduces hospitalization or death. Now, I know some people suspect it didn't in 2020. I really haven't gotten into arguing that point, but I can tell you now, I'm almost positive that if you test it now, because the virus has become less virulent over time, community immunity has risen over time, and you just don't hear many people going to the hospital or dying anymore. So I think it's going to be very hard for any kind of controlled study to prove that you have reduced hospitalization and death. Why do we study this? So we can give good advice. But why do we study this? So we aren't being dictated by the pharmaceutical companies simply to take a vaccine so they will make more money on it. Let's base it on science. But in order to have science, these studies have to be repeated. I think the flu vaccine should be repeated every year in an honest fashion. I am proud of Secretary Kennedy for all he's done to make it more science-based, and he's up against great odds and great opposition. So I think all of us should be proud of the direction we're going, but let's don't stop now. Let's keep pushing for evidence-based science with regard to vaccines. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Rand. I mean, thanks for all that you've done to kind of challenge the status quo time after time. We all know that's going to lead to better health outcomes. And, clearly we need to rid this country of corrupt corporate science and get back to real debate, real science that's going to bring us, better health outcomes. Next up, we have Dr. Retsef Levi. He's a world expert and a leader in risk management, safety, the application of data analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence. So that's very complicated stuff, but he's got, just great experience in analyzing data on drug safety, signal detection, biologics, manufacturing, all of those things that most of us don't quite comprehend. So he's a great person to have in that position, and, will challenge the status quo and will, once again, for the 8th time tonight, help us get us to better health outcomes. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I want to start by making sure that people understand that the ACIP recommendation regarding the Hep B vaccine is actually prescribing the 2 months as the minimum period of time that you would like to give it. And in fact, it leaves it up to parents whether to give it throughout childhood and when. So I actually think it's very much aligned with the ideal policy that the senator expressed. And I think, as the senator said, it makes a lot of sense. Now, I was recently asked in an interview what I think about the MAHA movement. And my answer was, as someone that is not an inherent part of the movement, that I think it is based on 3 core ideas and principles. One is the empowering individuals to own their health and make individual choices and be responsible for their health and not leave it up to others to manage that. The second one is an holistic perception of what health is, that is not just merely medicalized. And the third one is persistently trying to say the truth about vaccines, about our food, about our water, because that's kind of essential to be able to identify the problems and drive change. And I think that all of these principles have been guiding also the work of the new ACIP members. And I want to connect those 3 principles to some of the things that I hope we will be able to accomplish in that context. The first of which, speaking about the truth, and here something that I already talked about in our September meeting is a very strong commitment to start talking much more explicitly about vaccine injuries and vaccine injured people. I believe that what we have done as a society to the people that were injured by vaccines, and specifically the COVID-19 vaccine, is nothing shy of gross immoral failure. We have gaslighted them. We have left them alone. We didn't document their injuries. And we didn't invest anything in providing care and treatments to those that listened to the recommendations and went and vaccinated and found themselves sometimes seriously injured. I think that that's something that is relevant to all vaccines, but it's particularly relevant to the COVID-19 vaccines, and I hope we can change that fundamentally. The second one is about individual choice. And I think that if you listen to some of the liaison members during the recent discussion that we had, they had a lot of dishonest claims that this is not a really big change, the individual-based decision-making, because anyhow, ACIP and CDC is only providing recommendations, but they ignore and in fact, actively promoting vaccine mandates that basically prevents children from accessing schools and kindergartens, and sometimes even accessing medical care. And to me, that also connects to the other principle of holistic health, because I think that one of the most important aspects to a healthy society, the healthy population, are the children. If we are not going to have healthy children, we are not going to have healthy society. And vaccine mandates are, to me, an immoral act against children. And it's directly connected to some of the actions that we have seen during the COVID pandemic management, where we basically, as a society, sacrificed children, prevented them from going to schools, where there is ample science that indicates that this is really critical for their long-term health and long-term development. So one idea that I would like to leave you with is the thought of what can we do to fundamentally change our approach to children, specifically in the context of vaccine mandates, but maybe more broadly. And I wonder if it's not the time for this country to make a constitutional commitment to children and amend our constitution to essentially declare that education for children and young individuals is a right, is a civil right that cannot be taken from them under no circumstances. So I hope this is something that we can all be energized around that, and I feel that this is something core to the MAHA ideas. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, and thanks for all of the incredible work that you've been doing. I mean, clearly, no products are magic. No company should be protected by our government. You know, they shouldn't be protecting the manufacturers of food or pesticides or drugs or vaccines. Everything should be on the table. Everything should be questioned, you know, and must be questioned. And the government is supposed to protect the American people, you know, not to protect corporate profits. So, you know, that's just fundamental to the MAHA movement. Next up, we have the incredible Russell Brand. I've said so many nice things about Russell Brand. I don't even really know what to say that's new. I've said that he's lived through dark times and had tough battles, that he's an incredible speaker, all kinds of things. So
nothing nice to say, Tony. Don't feel obliged to make anything up. You know, just go Russell Brand. He's from England. He's on trial for rape. He's probably evil. You know, like it's the mainstream media. There must be a reason for it.
No, you are innocent. You are important. You are an incredible human being, and I'm glad to have you on our show.
Good. I'm glad you said that, and I actually love you, and I'm so happy that I'm writing a book for you right now. Hopefully for more people than you, but if you read it, that's a start. Listen to this on sort of. So this is what they're turning on Bobby, huh? This is in Newsweek today. Secretary Kennedy, excuse me. RFK Jr. has turned his back on science and the safety of the American people, said Representative Haley Stevens, the Michigan Democrat, moving to impeach Kennedy Jr. in a statement posted to X. The impeachment effort isn't likely to succeed, thank God, given the Republicans have a majority in both the House and the Senate. Newsweek reached out to HHS and Stevens by email to comment on this story and why it matters. So it's interesting, isn't it, to read the other side sometimes. Kennedy, who assumed the HHS leadership role in February, has sparked controversy for some of his decisions. The Centers for Disease Control, an HHS agency, fired 600 employees in August, and the White House dismissed CDC chief Dr. Susan Monterez and replaced her with Kennedy's deputy, Jim O'Neill. Well, any of you that know Jim O'Neill, that tall drink of water, what a guy he is. Have you spent any time with him? He's the person that told me that when they needed to get when big agriculture needed to oppose the threat of organic agriculture, what they did was they said we need a study that makes pesticide treated fruit and vegetables appealing. So what they did is that I think it was Stanford University, but it was certainly a sort of a significant American educational institution, conducted an experiment where they compared pesticide-treated apples with organic apples for vitamin C, so that they could release that the study findings were that pesticide treated apples are just the same as organic apples. You're wasting your money. Man, it just shows you how hard it is to fight against institutional interests. Thanks to Gary Brecka, I now understand what the International Medical Organization, the IMO, does. That they're essentially an organization that's used to ratify and verify toxicity, whether that's Agent Orange or numerous vaccines. Man, what I have come to realize, what I have been shown, what I have been taught is that we live in a culture of toxicity, whether that's the information that we're given, whether that's the food that we're fed, whether that's the way that we're invited to be continual participants in our own poisoning, both nutritionally, but also ideologically. Tony, you beautiful, brave, bold fella, I think that you're doing such a tremendous work in ensuring that Secretary Kennedy, who by any reasonable measure is a heroic individual, has access to support. Because I think were he subject solely to the criminalizing and incriminating vessels of ordinary media, he wouldn't stand a chance. Last week I referred to that, was it Secretary Kennedy or was it bin Laden? And that just shows you how extreme they are. I will wrap up my 5 minutes of MAHA fame by saying that we just cannot trust these people at all. However diabolical you imagine these institutions might be, you're not imagining them to be diabolical enough. I've experienced now the British media, the British government, and even aspects of the British judiciary behaving in ways that are extraordinary. They will use whatever they can against you. Fortunately for them, I did spend about 10 years being an imbecilic, womanizing, objectifying twerp, creating raw material for these allegations. But next year, I will get the opportunity to fight. And because of mostly Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, but certainly men that exemplify his principles, by which I mean love to the point of death, if necessary, which I think is what I feel in Robert Kennedy, and surely all of you that love him on this call, and I know that there are many of you that really love him, sense that about him. He is a man that's willing to die for what he believes in. And if you're not willing to die for what you believe in, then, I mean, without being harsh, your life is a waste of time and you're just here borrowing oxygen from people who could use it better. Stealing might be a kinder word. Anyway, praise Jesus. Thanks for having me on the call. Happy Christmas to all of you. I love you, Tony. Thanks for giving me, a controversial figure, a platform.
Yeah, thank you so much. And, your point is such a great one. Secretary Kennedy is dangerous. He's a threat. And he's a threat to those people who want to make money by poisoning the American public. And, we need Secretary Kennedy to challenge, some of the most powerful people on earth, the people who've lied to us, the people who've made us sick. And he has the courage, and the strength to get the job done. And we're going to help him. And I know you, Russell Brand, are going to help him. All of us on this call are going to help him in every way we can. And I think we're moving in the right direction. And I'm just grateful to all of you. So just going to wrap up with a few calls to action. So thank you for joining this call. I want to encourage all of you to engage respectfully with people in free and open conversations, to try to change people's minds, to not only speak to people who you're sure have the same point of view, speak to people who have a different point of view, read books that you disagree with. Let's try to transform people. Let's try to transform ourselves. That's what's going to make this country better. So let's be open-minded. Let's engage in real science, and let's have better health outcomes and make Americans healthy. So, just a couple of other things. You're going to get an email that has things that you can repost that recap some of the things that were on this call. Please sign up for the MAHA report on Substack. We're getting close to 100,000 people. Our goal is to have 1 million readers by the end of next year. Go to the legislative tracker on our website. Help us, volunteer, take action, come to our parties, keep coming on these calls, and have an incredible week and a great weekend. And I hope to see you all next week.
America's children are sick, and moms have been betrayed. The time for empty promises, long past. Now is a time for action. MAHA is the most powerful force of collective action in generations. The grassroots power of moms and activists has created an army of health warriors with more reach than all mainstream media combined. Together, we can end the chronic disease epidemic. MAHA's influence is reaching millions. It's reaching Congress. And that energy, these chain reactions, are working.
How about Operation Stork Speed?
Dozens of food companies removing toxic ingredients.
I plan to lead by example.
MAHA is now.
We're talking about how to change the culture.
The American people want America healthy again.
There's a renaissance moment in health in America.
For health, freedom, and the truth. Join us at MAHA Action.